Punk Revolution now. Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about post. What the heck is post? In genres, there's post-rock, post-punk, post-hardcore, post-bop, post. What the heck does post mean? It's confusing because the relationship that post-rock has to regular rock is very different than the relationship that post-punk has to regular punk, and that's also different than post-hardcore to hardcore. And it's like, what the heck does post even mean? You might think, okay, well, post means after, so post-rock must be rock that came after rock. But then there's post-punk, which kind of developed and formulated at the same time as regular old punk rock. So what the flick does post even mean anyways? And it's really confusing, and it doesn't mean the same thing for each genre. So I'm going to kind of break it down for you. I think it's very interesting. There's a lot of different sort of posts. There's post-bop, which is jazz, post-rock, post-punk. We've got freaking post-industrial, post-grunge, all of these different posts. I'm just going to be talking about 4 of my favorite post genres. Post-rock, post-hardcore, post-punk, and post-metal. Not in any particular order. Anyway, so let's get the frick started. We're going to start with post-rock, and I shall tell you what the post really means. So let's get started. So what the heck is post-rock? This is kind of a difficult genre, honestly, to sum up in a single sentence, because there's just so many different post-rock bands out there doing all sorts of different things, okay? There's post-rock bands that are more influenced by jazz, and more influenced by krautrock, and more influenced by punk and noise rock, and freaking experimental craziness. There's all sorts of post-rock that use all sorts of different genres and influences. So how do you sum up all these different bands under one genre, under what the heck is post-rock? Well, fundamentally, post-rock, what all these bands have in common is they're taking a typical rock band, you know, guitar, bass, drums, sometimes vocals, although post-rock tends to be a little bit more instrumental than your standard rock band. You're taking a rock band, and the musicians are approaching their music instead of thinking like, let's just write rock songs where it's going to be verse, chorus, where people can sing along and we'll tie it up in a nice 3-minute package, 4-minute package. Post-rock musicians are saying, let's take our let's take our instruments and focus on making some really interesting, unique textures and strange, bizarre, interesting, cool riffs. And instead of making like little verse, chorus, verse songs out of that, let's make freaking compositions. Let's use crescendos. Let's have freaking epic climaxes. Let's make freaking compositions rather than your standard rock songs. A totally different approach to rock music, although fundamentally using rock instruments. So even though, you know, if you look at the origins of post-rock, late 80s, early 90s, Talk, for example, 1988, Spirit of Eden, one of the first post-rock albums ever. This is an album that takes a lot of influence from jazz. You talk about Swans, another early post-rock band. This is a band that certainly takes a lot of influence from noise rock. They originated as kind of like a noisy industrial rock band. And you look at Slint, this is a post-rock band that takes a lot of influence from punk. So all sorts of different influences, different attitudes approaching this genre, but fundamentally coming together to approach rock differently than your typical rock band, kind of making freaking epic as hell compositions. Pretty mind-blowing, and there's a lot of different post-rock. There's post-rock that's droney and doesn't have any sort of crescendos or climaxes. There's post-rock that uses electronics. There's freaking, you just go check out Godspeed You Black Emperor, Sigur Rós, and freaking Swans and Slint, and freaking Bark Psychosis, and Mogwai. Those are like the big post-rock bands. Anyways, let's move on to freaking post-punk. So you might be wondering, what the heck is the difference between post-rock and post-punk? Is post-punk basically just post-rock, except you're playing punk instead of rock? No, actually. Post-rock and post-punk really don't have very much in common at all, if I'm being entirely honest. Try to make that separation in your mind, even though they have very similar genre names. Post-rock and post-punk, not very similar very much at all. And another really weird thing is post-punk, the term post implies after, like after punk. But post-punk and punk rock were really kind of formulated and solidified as genres kind of simultaneously, okay? Punk, yes, there were some bands in the 60s that were playing proto-punk like the Velvet Underground, but punk rock really didn't solidify as a genre until the mid to late 70s with bands like the Sex Pistols and freaking The Clash and the Ramones. But simultaneously as those bands were putting out music, there were bands like Television and Talking Heads and Wire who were putting out post-punk. So it's like, if post-punk and punk were born at the same time, then what the hell's the freaking difference between the genres? Well, post-punk is a little bit more experimental. You're gonna take the same attitude and instrumentation as punk rock, but you're gonna be a little bit more experimental, a little bit more serious, usually a little bit more heavy on the bass. The bass usually plays a more important role in post-punk, and that heavier bass usually makes for a darker atmosphere in post-punk. A little bit more emphasis on the rhythm section in general in post-punk compared to regular punk. So those are the main differences. Just a little bit more experimental. You might hear more synths in post-punk. You might hear some weird avant-garde jazz craziness in post-punk, like This Heat. You might hear even post-punk being incorporated in more poppy ways, like in the 80s with like freaking Echo and the Bunnymen, and then there's freaking post-punk revival in the 2000s, and there's still post-punk. There's plenty of post-punk is a huge genre. It's just people taking punk more seriously, more experimental, usually a darker atmosphere, a little bit more nerdy, a little bit less cool than regular punk, if I'm being entirely honest. Sorry, folks. But anyways, that's post-punk. Now we're going to move on to post-hardcore, which is confusing because what the heck? Post-hardcore? Isn't post-hardcore also kind of like post-punk because hardcore is punk? What the heck? So what the heck is post-hardcore if there's already a post-punk? Well, first you have to understand what hardcore is. Hardcore is short for hardcore punk. Hardcore punk being basically you take punk rock, you play it faster, more aggressively, maybe more yelling. Maybe these songs are only 2 minutes long of just sheer aggression. And yeah, so you got the hardcore, which kind of evolved in the late 70s and early 80s. You got that, and then you just kind of be a little bit more big brain with it, and then boom, you got post-hardcore. So while hardcore punk might just be 2-minute songs with only freaking 3 chords in it the entire time, post-hardcore might be a 7-minute song with 3 chords and 3 different time signatures and 3 different crazy riffs going on top of it to make a 7-minute song. That's a mind fuck, and it's crazy because hardcore is a simple genre, but post-hardcore is a very complicated genre. Okay, it's amazing. It's just you're gonna like just take hardcore and just deconstruct it and fuck it up as much as you can, you know? Really came together in the 80s with bands like Big Black, Husker Du, Minutemen, No Means No, and then it blew up in the freaking 90s with freaking Fugazi, and then you got freaking like emo core and emo, and then there's freaking like cheesy, crazy, weird, horrible post-hardcore like metalcore. I mean, metalcore is good. I mean like easy core crap, man. Like just, what the post-hardcore, and then there's like intellectual post-hardcore, which is like freaking post-rock and post-hardcore. What the hell? Imagine fusing post-rock and freaking post-hardcore. It doesn't make sense, like Slint Sputterland, and it's just like, what the fuck? How is there? So you're telling me that punk spawned post-punk at the same time as punk, but also spawned hardcore, which then spawned post-hardcore. What the fuck, folks? And now you're combining post-hardcore and post-rock, even though you told me these genres have nothing in common. That is correct. Let that sink in, folks. I don't get it either. It's just simple math. I'm a genius. So, I guess that's all I gotta say. I just gotta say real quick, post-hardcore is my favorite genre of all time. That's why I play post-hardcore. Anyways, let's move on to post-metal now. So in my opinion, post-metal is the easiest genre to wrap your head around because if you understand post-rock, you're gonna understand post-metal because post-metal is essentially post-rock except with freaking metal. So you're gonna be taking your instruments and focusing more on atmosphere and more on textures and more on building up, and then you hit the fucking distortion pedals on, and it's a climax! It's epic! Post-metal is literally so fucking epic, it's just so massive, just big chugging up. It's post-rock, it's, you know, crescendos, climaxes, beautiful textures using metal instrumentation. Not too hard to wrap your head around. This is a genre that really was born in the 90s. Gotta give credit where credit is due. Fucking Neurosis, okay? Neurosis, one of the best metal bands of all time. They deserve pretty much all the credit for this genre, if I'm being... Okay, that's a little... I mean, of course, you can't give all credit to a genre to one musician. There's so many different influences and who influenced Neurosis, you know what I mean? But regardless, Neurosis is really was at the forefront of creating this genre, of experimenting with these sounds, and damn, they did it really fucking well. If I'm being entirely honest, it's like, they still are to this day, 30 years later, like the best freaking post-metal band in my opinion. But in the 2000s, post-metal blew the hell up like crazy, and then there's freaking folk metal fusing with post-metal, and there's freaking drone metal fusing with post-metal, and there's freaking black metal fusing with post-metal, and just all these different subgenres coming together with post-metal. It's a very experimental genre, has a lot in common with atmospheric sludge metal, which is basically sludge metal, but more atmospheric. Very kind of genre name explains itself, unlike post-punk. But regardless, so that's post-metal, pretty epic genre, massive stuff. Neurosis, Cult of Luna, Isis, kind of Boris, I guess you could say. Lots of cool stuff like that. Thanks for watching my video, folks. Remember, there are a lot of post-genres out there. All sorts of them. None of them are really that self-explanatory, so sorry. But hopefully you understanding these 4 genres will help you understand a little bit more, help you wrap your head around a little bit more what to expect when you see that word post. And I think I've covered probably the 4 biggest post genres, at least within the umbrella of rock. So, thank you for watching, folks. Hope you found this video educational and mind-blowing, and I hope you learned about genres. And if you disagree with any of my videos, leave a comment saying you hate me and dislike my video. And if you liked it, you can go ahead and kiss my